beyond Pakistan. They never had any worldview. Their vision was never beyond Afghanistan. Al-Qaeda was the danger to the Western world, to the United States. And Al-Qaeda was blamed for 9/11. Now, in my opinion, the fundamental mistake made was that the United States did not separate the two. Because by lumping Taliban and Al-Qaeda together, that's why we are in the current mess today.
But US government thinks that Taliban are already in bed with Al-Qaeda.
But my enemy's enemy is my friend. If in the beginning this mistake was not made, and efforts were made to isolate Al-Qaeda, and there was every evidence that Al-Qaeda was being isolated. There was a meeting, I never forget this, just before. Remember, the Bush administration attacked Afghanistan under 4 weeks after 9/11. And just before the attack, there was a meeting of the anti-Taliban commanders in Peshawar. And they recommended to the US, do not attack Afghanistan. Give us time. The Taliban are imploding. And the Taliban Shura meets in Kabul and recommends to Osama bin Laden to leave Afghanistan. So had more pressure been applied, this wedge would have been created. Today we are in a situation where they've been lumped together. Not just them now. Taliban and Pashtun nationalism has morphed. Then the jihadi organizations that were created in the 80s, their ideological members are now in that place. Then foreign players have come into it. Then there are criminals in Pakistan in the name of Taliban because there's no centralized control anymore. We don't even know exactly what the enemy is. Swat, which had nothing at all to do with the Taliban movement in Afghanistan, which was an indigenous movement for governance, has now become part of the Taliban as of 2007.
So you think Taliban is not a threat for the United States?
Taliban do not have the capacity to hit the US. Al-Qaeda had. And that's why I think that the mess that we are in right now, if efforts are not made, because if Hamid Karzai today, if he's now talking about differentiating between the two, if Hamid Karzai today is saying the Taliban are not terrorists, Al-Qaeda is, and then the wedge should be created, that means that what we are facing right now in Pakistan is directly related to this, because Taliban were Pashtun, the Pashtun solidarity came in, MMA won in 2002 elections simply because they opposed the US and the ANP was considered anti-Taliban. So the Pashtun, where the Pashtun vote was going was quite clear. Taliban ceased to be Taliban. Then people who did not agree with Taliban's ideological moorings accepted them because, or joined them because they were considered Pashtuns.
Okay. Brian Catulus, yes. You have been to Pakistan many times, and now you are sitting with me in Islamabad.
Right.
And some US newspapers and US TV channels, they are claiming that Islamabad will be taken over by Taliban very soon. So why you are in Islamabad? Maybe you are on some spying mission, as think many Pakistanis.
Absolutely not. I'm an independent analyst. I work at a think tank in Washington, and I believe that I can't just take my media or my own government's statements at face value. For me to do my job, I've got to come to places like Pakistan. And this is my fourth trip. And first, before we get into the discussion, I must say, I come as a friend of the Pakistani people, and every time I come, I'm struck by the generosity and the hospitality. Imran has actually hosted me in his home on previous trips. We've hosted him. And this sense of siege, this sense of the most dangerous country we see in our headlines in the United States. When you come here, you know, yes, the security situation in certain parts of the country, I'm probably not going to go to. You know, it's probably very difficult for an American to go. But I hope someday I will be able to, because I do believe that these kinds of discussions, the sorts of discussions I've been having with some of our friends here in Pakistan, some of the officials, really help foster a better understanding on my part as an analyst, and could help in a small way build a stronger relation between Pakistan and the United States, the people most importantly.
So you don't feel insecurity in Islamabad right now?
Well, look, I've lived in Iraq. I've lived in Palestine, in the Gaza Strip, and in Ramallah. So I take this as part of my job, and I think it's essential for more Americans, especially those who pontificate on our TV and in our media to actually try to come here and see the ground truth and have some of the difficult discussions, because what you see and what I've seen on this trip is a very complicated situation.
So the ground reality in Pakistan is different from the headlines of New York Times and Washington Post?
Well, I think, sometimes the New York Times and the Washington Post, their headlines capture more of a sensationalist view. But when you look at some of the stories, I think there's one key story here in Pakistan that is missed by many Americans. And it's this issue of governance and democracy. And it's something that I fundamentally believe in. I actually think it's tied to the security situation. It's tied to the economic situation. And I actually think there are a lot of Americans, including our new president, Barack Hussein Obama, having a president like this, who I think is cognizant of the real challenges of not being this Bush-like war on terror with us or against us. Now, as they're implementing their policy, I think they're seeing some challenges in trying to get it connected to the ground reality here. But I think there's a recognition that focusing on governance, focusing on economic development, focusing on dignity, which is something that President Obama has talked about. I hear that a lot on this visit. I've heard it on previous visits, that people, first and foremost, want dignity and respect, and many of the basic things that we want in the United States. And sometimes we forget that in our policy debates and discussions.
So what do you think? Do you think that Taliban is a threat for the United States or not?
Well, look, some analysts in the United States rightly say that there has been a relationship between the Taliban and al-Qaeda. But also you look at President Obama himself saying that, look, we need to engage certain parts of the Taliban, much in the same way that he's talked about engagement with Cuba, with Iran, and a whole host of other things. I actually think it's potentially revolutionary depending on how they implement it. So I think if there's a way to drive a wedge between these forces, and you can't just do it militarily is the main point. And in fact, perhaps the military means is the least effective means. I think the political, diplomatic, the economic means, because I see this phenomena of the Taliban, one conclusion, interim conclusion from this trip, is that it's not just a security issue. It is very much a class issue. It is people who actually have felt disserviced by some of the landlords and some of the elites that have controlled this country for decades, if not decades, even centuries perhaps. It's a class issue of between the haves and the have-nots. It's a complicated issue, so we need a multifaceted strategy, not just simple drone attacks or other things to try to address this.
So right now we see a lot of misunderstanding between the US government and the Pakistani government, between the US media and the Pakistani media. What is the root cause?
Well, I think the root cause is a turbulence due to transitions, both transitions here in Pakistan and transitions in the United States. And I firmly believe that this new administration, I can't defend all of their policies, but I firmly believe that there's a genuine effort to really to turn the page on the Bush era, to change the way that we do business. But getting the officials lined up and on the same page, I think doing this through public statements, as we've seen over the past week or so, is perhaps the least effective means to do that. The Pakistan-U.S.
Hillary Clinton instigating Pakistanis all over the world to rise against their own government.
Right, but Hillary Clinton also saying and recognizing that there was a history here of the U.S. Involvement in supporting the Taliban and some of the forces in the Mujahideen in the Afghan war. So trying to move beyond, I think, the history is terribly important, and recognizing that we do have common challenges. But in my view, the real work that needs to be done behind closed doors, not in these public statements. And I worry that these public statements get stuck in this moment, reactive to some of the events that are out there, and there's no strategic framework for building and enhancing this very important relationship.
Imran Khan, what is the root cause?
I had great hopes in Obama. I still have hope in him. But what is happening in Afghanistan is basically not a big change from what George Bush was doing. I blame Pakistan government for this. In fact, I tried my best. I approached the Prime Minister when he called an APC. I kept going on television saying this is a golden opportunity. This is a new administration. Send people who understand what is going on, what is the history of Pakistan's tribal area in Afghanistan. Make them understand there's got to be a change of strategy, because this strategy is going nowhere. The way what is happening in Afghanistan and Pakistan tribal areas, there is no end in sight. There is no roadmap to end this war. No one can tell me today how is this going to end. Pakistan government has no plan, no proactive policy. They ended up doing exactly what was required by the Obama administration, whatever they told them.
So it is Obama administration putting pressure on the Pakistani government to do operation in the Dir and Bunair areas.
If Pakistan government does not have a roadmap, which they don't, then they're going to follow whatever is told to them, because that's where the money is coming from. Now, what I felt very strongly was they should have been experts of that area. This area has a history. It has a geography. The people, we should explain to them that this area has resisted every invader ever since Alexander downwards. Now, to expect that as long as there's US occupation of Afghanistan, that we are going to be able to cope with this, that we will be able to stop people from going, any Pakistan government that is going to guarantee that we will stop people going across, they're basically lying. There are 1.5 million armed men in the tribal areas. How many soldiers are you